Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 49 of Daffy's Roundtable. On this episode, I'm joined by my first Australian guest, Coop of Coop's Reptiles. Join us as we discuss Australian herpetoculture, keeping reptiles outside, and finding reptiles in the wild. We also talk about blue tongue skinks, egernia, and Boyd's forest dragons, one of my personal favorites. But before we do that, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, let's get into this week's conversation with Coop of Coop's Reptiles. Coop, hello.
Hi, how are ya?
Good, how are you? Thank you for coming on.
Oh, no worries at all. It's quite easy for me. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm relaxing. I don't know what time it is for you over there in Canada.
It's 11:30, so it's still a fairly good time. Still a fairly good time.
Okay, nice.
I'm a night owl anyway, so it doesn't matter. Awesome. First of all, let me say I'm very excited to do this. Very excited to chat with you, and I'm very excited to hear the Coop story. So let's start there. How did you get into reptile keeping? Where did it all start?
Yeah, well, obviously living here in Australia, we have no shortage of reptiles. So
Yes.
I was originally born up in North Queensland, where it's quite humid and warm up there. Lots of reptiles running around all over the place. We used to get snakes in our backyard trying to steal birds and things. My dad used to keep birds. And I vividly remember I was only a couple years of age and I was in the front yard playing, doing whatever you do as a kid. And I saw some little agamid lizards. I believe they were knobby dragons or some sort of two-line dragon. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And ended up catching a couple with dad and keeping them for a while. And then that obviously evolved into turtles and snakes and all sorts of other stuff, whatever we could find while we were up there. And then after, I think I was about 7 years old, we moved down to where I am now. And obviously had to leave all those behind and just sort of picked it up again from here with everything that was local here. And back then I didn't know you had to have a reptile license or anything like that. So as time's gone on, I've obviously moved on all those other things. And or mostly like when I was young, like a lot of us when we're young here in Australia and we catch things out of the wild, they don't always survive. So that was one way that they sort of thinned out. But then obviously got the license and I've been going strong ever since. And obviously it's a never-ending addiction.
Awesome. Okay, so jumping off something you just said there, reptile license or keeper's license. Maybe let's first start off with that. The laws in Australia are very different than the laws here, obviously. So can you kind of break down for us how they work? You guys can only keep species from Australia, is that correct?
Yes, there is one or two exceptions of things that are maybe in an offshore island off Australia, like emerald tree monitors are one, depending on what state you're in. But for the most part, yeah, it's only Australian natives that you can keep. And it goes a step further depending on what state you're actually living in. So each state has its own individual rules, and some are a bit more relaxed than others. There's some particular states where you can only keep the animals that are actually native to that state, not even anything else in Australia. So it's some places are very, very restricted. But yeah, across the board, typically in most places, you need some sort of license and permitting for certain animals here in this country. Yeah.
Awesome. And what state are you in?
I'm in New South Wales, so it's not too bad here. We do have quite a decently diverse species list of things we can keep. It's kind of got a tiered system as well. So you've got your basic animals like your bearded dragons, your Simpsons pythons, carpet pythons, that sort of thing. And then you move up the levels, some things are more rare on that class 2 license. Like a few things I've got here, like the egernia depressor, there are two, something a bit more less common that your beginner sort of level person's not really going to probably do that well with. And then as you go up further in that, you get into your venomous and other special things like that.
And do you need different permits to be able to keep things like venomous and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it essentially, for the basic license, you'll get that first. All you have to do is pay some money and they'll send you a license, then you can keep stuff. And then from there, you basically have to sort of prove yourself in order to level up each time. So in order to go from the basic to the next level up, you need to have had an animal for a certain amount of time and shown you can care for it properly. And then you can progress. And then to get to venomous, you have to do certain courses and get signed off and things like that to actually get the permit. That's in New South Wales anyway. Other states, things that can be easier or more difficult, just depending on their specific regulations.
Okay, very very cool. And then you guys also are, well, it's Australia won't export animals out, correct? Or reptiles specifically.
No,
Um,
so nothing goes out and nothing comes in either. So it's
and
pretty
why
locked down.
like yeah, is there a reason behind why this, like why the rules are like this way?
Well, they say it's for protecting native wildlife. They're trying to prevent poaching and smuggling and things like that. So that's another reason why we have to have a license in this state, is because the natural wildlife is protected. So you can't go out and just catch something or anything like that. It's all got to be captive bred. Obviously, way back in the past, it was all wild caught. But once those established animals came in, it's sort of illegal from there on to actually catch anything. So, and then another big thing too is invasive species risks. So we've obviously had some devastating things here in Australia with the cane toad and other invasive plants and all sorts. They're just wrecking the environment. So they're trying to prevent all that sort of stuff as well, which is understandable if you think about it and the impact it's had. But just make it a bit frustrating when you're an Australian keeper and you looking over to you guys and keep chameleons and all sorts of other cool, crazy animals. But we have some cool stuff here, so it's good at least.
Yeah, I think well, you guys have all the cool stuff there. um, some of the coolest species I think are not I think I'm sure are coming out of Australia, but even for us, it's almost the other way around. Like we do have some Australian species like bearded dragons, of course, are everywhere and things like that. But then you have Boyd's forest dragons, for example, that are almost impossible to find. I don't think I only know of a couple of pairs here in Canada. So it's very interesting that yeah, it's always like the grass is always greener on the other side, I guess, huh? Cool.
Exactly
Okay.
right.
So maybe yeah, obviously I guess you're keeping quite a variety of species, so maybe not all of them, but can you list some of the cooler species that you're currently working with?
Yeah, so I've got quite a few different things here. It's a bit more all over the place at the moment, but of course I've got quite a few blue tongue species. I've always liked blue tongues, and very lucky here that I can keep a lot of them outside. So it's part of the reason I have so many. But yeah, I've got the blotched blue tongues. I've got my Centralians and my Western blue tongues just next to me here. And I've got one Eastern blue tongue as well. And then for more of the weirder stuff behind me here, I've got a Gillen's monitor, if you know what they are, a Varanus gilleni. They're really cool. I've obviously got my egernia depressor, my one snake, which is a pygmy python, another really cool species. That's, again, not too common. And I really, really enjoy it. They're the smallest python in the world. I've got a couple of turtles. I've really been getting into my turtles this last year or so. So I've got a few of them outside too. And what else have I got? I've got obviously my Boyd's forest dragons.
Yes. I was gonna say you're forgetting my favorite one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's everything. Yeah. It becomes hard to remember sometimes.
That's really cool. See, like for example, turtles is another thing. We don't really have many turtles up here in Canada at all. Very, very rare to find keepers or even tortoises. You already answered the are you allowed to go out and collect animals, which obviously you said you can't, but do you still go out and go herping every now and then?
Yeah, for sure. So uh, everywhere's pretty good for finding stuff here in Australia. Sometimes depending on where you live, you get some things just crawl into your backyard. Like we occasionally get red belly black snakes, blue tongues, a bunch of little skinks, obviously. But yeah, as you move down the coast from where I live, you can get quite a few different species. So we'll typically go out, me and a few friends, and road cruise at night in some certain spots and see lots of cool things. A lot of people overseas love diamond pythons and death adders, tiger snakes, that sort of thing. You see all that stuff. But I did recently actually go on a trip to Alice Springs. I still need to put out some videos from that. Right in the center of Australia, finding bearded dragons and sand monitors and things like that, and a bunch of cool little stuff that I really enjoy. So yeah, I do like to get out and try and herp as much as I can. It's obviously an amazing place to do all that sort of stuff, but just finding the time's the hard part.
For sure. And this is going to be a reoccurring theme. And I'm probably going to say this a bunch of times on this episode, but jealous. I'm very, very jealous. But yeah, okay, that's very, very cool. So one of the things I've seen, you mentioned from some of your videos in the past, is that you were doing some research on some of those species as well. Could you maybe tell us about that for a minute?
Yeah, so obviously straight out of school, I went to university and did my undergraduate degree there. And while I was there, I actually realised that on campus there was a research group called the Lizard Lab, which is run by Martin Whiting. He's a amazing herpetologist, and basically, sent him a message and got involved with some volunteer work looking after the animals, and then eventually helping with some of the studies, and went on to be employed as a research assistant as well. So we looked at quite a few different species, a lot of native Australian skinks from the sort of Sydney region, and just working on a lot of different stuff with them. So originally I started out working on a blue tongue project, literally looking at why is a blue tongue's tongue blue. And, the original sort of theory is obviously that they stick it out and blue kind of looks like a poisonous color in nature, which it still probably has some truth in it as well. But we also realized based on what's the word of it? Basically it reads ultraviolet colors, a sensor essentially. We put that on the tongue and we could see it was highly ultraviolet reflective. So to birds' vision, which is one of their main predators, they can see ultraviolet. So when a blue tongue actually sticks out that tongue, it's like a bright flash of light, which essentially scares the bird or startles it and gives it time to escape, or maybe prevents the bird from trying to eat it. So there's a lot more going on under the surface than you'd expect. So that was pretty cool to see.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. And then we also did some work with some other smaller skink species like white skinks and black rock skinks, and looking at family dynamics. So we'd obviously collect some animals, they'd have babies, and then we'd see how those babies interact with each other, with their mothers, all that sort of stuff. I'm not exactly sure what all happened from that. I still have to actually hit up the person to get the results. But one of the main things I was actually working on was another species called a three-toed skink. Now, they're very interesting. They're very common along this part of Australia where I live, but you don't really see them because they live most of their life under the ground. But they're a reptile that can have eggs, or it could have live birth, depending on which population it's living in. So quite a strange animal in the reptile world to be able to have that sort of choice. And we basically looked at how climate change and other varying factors could potentially affect their survival and their reproduction in the future. So I believe the ones closer to the coast where it's warmer, they often had eggs. Because it's a lot easier for eggs to survive in a place where it's warm, whereas the ones that lived in more cold areas usually held on and have had live birth pretty much. So it means that they could get access to warmer spots and move around and actually develop those young inside them to survive in that cooler environment. So very, very cool stuff, and very cool species to work with. And then just before I left that job, due to COVID, a lot of funding and things got messed around, so I ended up having to leave. But we were actually working on some bearded dragons as well, teaching them social learning. So we had a whole bunch of them outside in all these enclosures. You can check a video I've got on my channel about it. It's really cool. And essentially, we're going to teach them a task, do only a few of them. We're going to release those ones out to be with all the rest of them, and then they would obviously do that task in front of all the others, and we're going to see if the other ones picked up on it and actually started performing the task without having to be trained. So it's cool to test all the cognition of reptiles and everything going on with them, and it's amazing what you can find.
That's very, very cool. But that last one, you said it never ended up never ended up finishing it, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's still ongoing at the moment, but it's very, very cool stuff.
Yeah, that is very cool stuff. And then even just being in a position like that where you get to travel and see all these reptiles. I mean, you can go herping, but when you're doing the research and you're there on multiple occasions, you're seeing different behaviors every time you're out. That's really cool. Really cool. So you finished doing that. What are you currently doing?
So now I'm actually a zookeeper. So just after I finished studying at uni, and then while I was doing that work with the lab, I was also starting to do a little bit of work in the zoo industry as well. And as the stuff with the science stuff went away, the zookeeping just became more and more. And now I'm doing that full time. So yeah, zookeeper life.
Awesome. And is it are you working with all sorts of animals? Or is it reptile zookeeping mostly?
So I do work with quite a few things, but I am a reptile keeper. So day to day reptiles are pretty much my main thing. It's my whole life. spend 8 hours a day at work with reptiles, and I come home and do another couple of hours work with reptiles.
With the
It's
reptiles.
non-stop. Yeah.
What do you think some of the biggest differences between seeing reptile behavior in zoo type setups versus home type setups are, if
Yeah,
any at
right.
all?
Yeah, it's interesting because the perk of a zoo is obviously they can have much larger enclosures,
Yeah,
which
of course.
some people say enclosure size doesn't matter, but for me personally, I think you have so much more room for activities and enrichment and just
Yeah,
interesting things and more things for the animals to do, which is of course great for them in their captive lives. Keeping their brains stimulated and working is obviously great. So yeah, there is quite a few differences. Obviously, you get to see more wide range of behaviors, obviously as well. Um, so yeah, it is quite different, but you just got to do as best as you can at home, I suppose, and try and make things as big as possible.
yeah, and then following that, do you think that reptile keepers are maybe setting up uh more accurate naturalistic setups for the reptiles because of because you're keeping like native species and you can kind of go out and see them, or do you think that, I don't know, it can be replicated off pictures and it doesn't really matter? What do you think?
Well, yeah. So here in Australia, it's I reckon it is a bit easier, or for anywhere, if you're keeping a species and you live, you know, within a few hours or whatever of its natural range, it's going to be so much easier to get an actual visual representation of what it's actually living in, and you can even source some materials from its
I was about to
environment.
ask.
So
Okay, yeah,
yeah, so here in Australia, like oftentimes keepers like myself and a lot of my friends and things will go out and collect some hollow logs and all sorts of things like that, like right from the environment. So obviously not trying to destroy any habitats or anything like that, but
for sure.
it's all the natural stuff that the animal would naturally be living on. So it's much more real compared to overseas. Like it's probably hard for you to find a hollow gum tree branch or something, if you wanted to keep a bearded dragon or anything like that. So it's not
Yeah.
quite the same, but I don't know how much it strictly matters to the animals. That I just like the authentic look, if you know what I mean.
No, 100%. It's interesting because, so like you said, well, first of all, it's probably impossible for me to find the hollow
Yeah.
anything from Australia, but it's because like over here, there's almost a fear of going out and collecting like wood and anything from outside, and the fear of pests. And even if anybody does do it, they're like boiling it and cooking it and sterilizing it for weeks. Is that something you ever have to worry about, or is it sort of because again, anything that could be collected is native that it's not so much a worry?
Yeah, so I understand why you would do that a lot more overseas, especially if it's not an animal that comes from that specific environment. You might take something from, so it might have something different in it the animal's not used to. But here in Australia, we're always keeping Australian things. So everything that we might put into an enclosure, an animal's designed over millions
Already,
of years to deal with typically.
yeah,
So I mean, some people do take it to the extreme here as well. They'll bleach rocks and cook things in the oven and stuff, and that's fine if you want to do that. There has been quite a few times I've brought in a hollow log or something, and my enclosure's filled with ants after it that I don't know were actually
right,
inside it. But
yeah,
I'll typically just give a good visual clean, and the best thing really is to leave it out in the sun for a few weeks.
yeah,
Middle of summer, out on something warm, and most things that are living inside a rock or a log are going to vacate if they've been baking in the sun for a couple of weeks here in Australia. So that's the
yeah,
simple thing I like to do. And as long as it looks visually clean, usually safe. I've never really had an issue. The only thing, like I said, is a couple of ants or something like that.
yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. Okay, and then on that topic, and you mentioned earlier you keep a lot of species outside. Is it just blue tongue skink species, or are you keeping other species as well?
Over the years, I've kept a lot of things outside. Like when I first moved down here and up in Queensland, I had a lot of different little agamids outside. I've kept bearded dragons outside here as well. Blue tongues now, and then also my turtles, of course, as well. Again, they're a East Coast species too, so they do well outside here too. So yeah, it makes keeping very, very easy when you got an animal from its natural sort of range out in your backyard. It's a very easy way to keep.
Yeah, well, that was actually my question. So, like, you said from a different range the tortoises, correct? Is that what you just
No, no,
said?
they're on the East Coast as well, so they're
Oh,
perfectly
okay.
adapted to this climate. Yeah.
So it's climate. Okay, so you do kind of have to tailor. It's not like any species from anywhere in Australia will work well in your backyard. It kind of, you do have to tailor it to kind of your relative area and climate.
Yeah, 100%. Like things like my Western blue tongues or my Centralian blue tongues, they come from Central or Western Australia, complete opposite side of where I am. And where I am here, it gets a lot more humid than those sort of areas. So if I put them outside, they'd get a respiratory infection within a few weeks, and it'd be pretty bad. So yeah, there's certain things that you cannot keep outside depending on where you are. There's a lot of different climates and ranges in Australia. I think a lot of people overseas don't really recognize that, but it does change quite a lot throughout the country. But with that said, if you set things up in a specific way, you might be able to get around that. So if I maybe put these guys on my deck with cover and they wouldn't get any rain or anything like that, then most of the year they could probably do fine out there. I've kept bearded dragons in that sort of way as well. You just got to really understand what's going on and how to prevent any issues.
Yeah. So do you ever, like, I don't know if this question even makes sense, but like, how do you set them up? Like, do you ever have any problems with escapees, and how do you set it up to prevent that?
Yeah, so
because you don't really, there's no, like, it's not a full-on cage, right? It's almost like an open.
Yeah, well, some of them are fully enclosed, which is obviously great. But then depending on the species too, like in the ones that have sort of open tops, they've just got blue tongues inside. So I've got really high walls that they can't climb up. They're not a good climbing species. Smooth-sided walls are a big one. And it's also sunk under the ground as well, so they can't dig out. So yeah, just those basic things. And those are things you learn over time. Like I said, when I was younger and I used to just catch things and keep them, you learn a lot of mistakes pretty quickly because if your enclosure's not good enough, the animal's going to get out or something's going to happen, and you know not to do that again.
Yeah. It just seems like it's too. Again, I've never been able to keep anything outside here, so I don't know exactly how it is, but it just seems like it's too easy to make a mistake. Let's put
Yeah,
it is. Don't know.
These days, especially now, I like to have everything fully enclosed. Like I don't want to take the risk anymore. It's a lot safer like that. The only exception is my turtles, but I know nothing's going to get them. They're big enough now where nothing's going to take them or anything like that.
Oh yeah, predators is another thing. I guess I didn't even think about that. Yeah, is it? I guess you said birds are blue tongue skinks predators.
Yeah,
how
100%.
how do you prevent? How do you like? How do you stop birds?
Yeah, well, typically a lot of these larger things that I keep, especially once they're an adult size, not much is really going to try and get them. It's only when they're smaller. So I'd always keep smaller ones inside or in a fully enclosed thing. But now, yeah, like I said, most things are going to be fully covered just to prevent any potential things happening.
Right, that makes sense. If you took a species, like one species of blue tongue skink, and you raise it outside, and the same species, and you raise it inside, do you see any physical differences in the animals?
Nothing too noteworthy. I've never actually. I have kind of done it actually. I think the ones outside are a bit stronger and they have sort of kind of a bit thicker scales due to the natural sunlight. That's just from anecdotal evidence. But why I say stronger is typically if they're outdoors, they're in a larger enclosure. They got more muscle tone. They get to move around in a larger area, and obviously exposure to that natural sunlight. They're typically bigger, fitter animals that do a lot better. But indoors to outdoors, there's not a significant difference, I don't think, as long as they're being kept right indoors, of course.
For sure. And do you find that and I don't know if you've ever like actually witnessed this, but do you find they're picking up random things or bugs that are coming in? Are they eating things outside, or is it strictly what you're feeding them still?
Oh no, if a grasshopper or something jumps into the enclosure, they're going to go for it for sure.
Okay, yeah.
And when you do put them outside, the funny thing is their behavior does definitely change. I don't know if it's the extra daylight or something that's going on, but you have a perfectly tame lizard in your hand inside, and it loves you essentially. It's like a little pet. As soon as you take it outside, it turns into a wild animal again. It'll try and bite you. It'll hiss at you. It'll just completely change what that animal behaves like. So when something comes into their enclosure, they're going to attack it more like a wild animal than what you're probably used to when you see them running around inside. So, yeah, it's a bit different in that regard.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never kept blue tongue skinks at all, but it's almost like every time I do see one in an enclosure or something, they're almost just kind of sitting there. So it's kind
Mm,
of hard to imagine them like hunting or trying to catch or eating something out of not
yeah,
a bowl. But I'm not hating on blue tongue skinks, everybody. I'm just saying.
yeah. It's not just blue tongues though. Like you see it with a lot of other things as well. Like bearded dragons will be the same. You know, they might come up to you and want you to hand feed them some greens or crickets or whatever, but put them outside, they'll probably run away from you. They'll try and hide. They'll try and bite you. All sorts of stuff like that. Same with turtles too. Turtles usually, if you walk into a room, they'll just swim at you in the tank trying to
Yeah.
get food from you. You put the same turtles outside. As soon as they see you, they dive down to the bottom. They don't want anything to do with you. At least for the first few months until they get used to living outside. So
So
yeah, it's
that's
very interesting.
very, very interesting. Yeah. Have you ever seen? You said you have seen bearded dragons in the wild, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Are
So
they? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, we get a species here locally, and then I've been and seen the ones in Alice Springs as well. The central bearded dragon. Yeah,
So you have a species of bearded dragon locally?
yeah,
Do you
the eastern bearded dragon.
do you
Hmm.
see them frequently?
Not frequently, unfortunately.
Uh-huh.
I feel like they're a lot more common as you go a couple of hours inland. On the coast, right where I am, they're quite actually a rare find these days. But when you find one, it's very, very exciting because they're probably, in my opinion, they're the most impressive bearded dragon you can find.
Okay, and are they like some species you find outside and the second they even catch a glimpse of you, they're gone. Are they very skittish in the wild or less so?
It depends how you find them. So the last one I found, I put up a video of it, and it was basking on a branch. It was halfway up a tree, and
Wow.
when they're sitting on a tree like that, they typically will just try and blend in. They rely on their camouflage. So I walked right up to it, and I could just pick it up off the branch. But if it was on the ground, it'd probably be a bit different. It would know that it's exposed, and it would probably dart off as soon as I came close to it. So it just depends in what setting they're in.
Very interesting. So bearded dragons can climb.
Oh, they climb all the time. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so interesting. I don't think that's something that like I've ever heard before. Like, most people even here when they set them up, they'll the maximum they're giving them is maybe like 18 inches high and just a couple of logs, and you expect them
Yeah.
like you see them basking on them, but nobody's giving them the opportunity to, or nobody that I've seen at least is giving them opportunity to actually climb, like you said, up a tree. Are you like tree like human height up or
Well, for example, that one I found in that video was about head height. And
wow.
then all the central bearded dragons, the ones that are all over the world, the third most popular pet in the world, or whatever they say these days. When I saw those in Alice Springs, all of them bar one were basking on a tree. Again, probably about head height. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
Even
Wow.
a big adult female that actually had some eggs inside her. She was a monster animal, and yeah, she was halfway up a tree, just sitting there. So yeah, they definitely climb a lot more than you'd expect. I think they often sleep in trees as well to prevent predators from eating them during the night and things like that.
And is there any evidence or signs of them burrowing when you're outside there?
Not that I've personally seen, but I know they definitely do. There's a
Okay.
guy here in Australia, Beardy Vet. He's been researching bearded dragons for a long time, and he's got videos of them diving down into burrows and things like that. So they definitely make use of burrows as well. I think a lot during the colder seasons as well for the more insulating factor. But yeah, they use their whole environment like a lot of reptiles do. Especially bearded dragons, they can climb, they can dig, they can run. So they're going to use everywhere that they can. They're not just stuck on a piece of tile or something.
Yeah, no, it's exactly. They're not just stuck on a piece of tile. It's very interesting. You don't um, even when you imagine them in the wild, because of how a lot of keepers are keeping them, you start to imagine them in a specific way in the wild too. And so
Yeah.
hearing about all these different things is almost like, oh wow, we're far further off than we think. Do you keep any bearded dragons?
Not anymore. I had one. She just passed away. A pygmy bearded dragon, or Henry Lawson and I had her for 14 years. So she just passed away recently of old age. So yeah, amazing animals. But yeah,
Okay.
not any currently.
Okay, and what was the species you snapped me a picture of right before we started?
Oh,
Um,
I forgot to mention that. Oh, that's the one that I missed. It's right next to me. It's a mountain dragon. So
Okay.
They're kind of like a miniature bearded dragon that's a lot more active, and they're like little they're crazy. They're all over the place.
I don't know. Are Rankin dragons from Australia as well?
Yeah, I think that's what you guys call the bearded dragon I had, the Henry Lawson eye. They're like
Okay.
a smaller species of bearded dragon.
Smaller
Yeah.
species. Yeah. Okay. So this the mountain dragon is not that either.
No, they're in a
Even smaller.
different genus. They're actually the one of the smallest dragons in Australia, and then the most southern agamid in the world. So adult size over there, they're only about that big. They're tiny, and they're little spiky things, and they live obviously in the mountain sort of areas on rocky outcrops and stuff. So yeah, they're very cool little animals.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I wonder if there's if any of them are floating around in the hobby.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty rare over there. They're even rare here. Not a lot of
Yeah.
people breed them, and they're not very long lived. I don't think either. Like a lot of smaller gamids. So
Okay.
if you have any over there, that'd be pretty cool. But I'd be
I've
very
never
surprised.
I've never even heard of them, so I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so maybe yeah. So um, the blue tongue skinks that you're keeping outside, we will talk about that for a minute as well.
Yeah.
How many species are you keeping out, or is it species or locales?
No, so I've got two species
Okay.
that I can keep outside well here, and that's your eastern blue tongue and your blotched blue tongue. I get eastern blue tongues, in my backyard here. They literally live in this area naturally. Your blotched blue tongue lives a little bit further south, about 2 or 3 hours south of where I am, and they're one of the most cold tolerant in that group of animals. They're very dark in color with some very pretty colors between all the black that they have. And they're my favorites. They're
They are,
really pretty and really tough.
What did you call them? Sorry, the blotched, right? The alpine blotched.
Alpine blotched blue tongue.
Yeah, I actually that's one of the questions I had. So through watching your videos, that's also my favorite, just visually. They're
Yeah.
absolutely stunning. What is the and sorry to cut you off there, but I'll let you
No,
jump
you're
back to
fine.
that one. But what is the difference in temperament or behavior between those guys and all the other blue tongues that are more commonly seen? Because I like those are pretty rare here on our side as well, I think.
Yeah, overseas they're extremely rare, but yeah, they're definitely my favorite of the whole group. They're I think they're the prettiest, but they also are extremely cold tolerant. So it can snow where they come from. They come from the Blue Mountains, which is
Wow.
really
Okay.
one of the coldest places in Australia,
Okay.
and that's why they're so dark in color, to help absorb more sun and live in that harsh environment. But between each other, they're actually quite friendly animals, so they can cohabitate very, very well. Whereas most blue tongues will kind of just try and rip each other apart. They're not very friendly at all. But the blotched blue tongues seem to get along really quite well. So for those reasons, they make a really good captive animal to keep, and they usually tame right down, get very friendly, and they're absolute garbage units. They'll eat anything you give them, pretty much.
Yeah.
They very rarely refuse a meal. So
More
yeah,
than
they're very
other
cool to keep.
more than other blue tongues?
Yeah, 100%. Some can be picky with certain things, but the blotchies will just take down anything pretty much.
Very, very cool. Okay. And so when you are keeping them outside, how are you sort of keeping them? Is it groups, like you're saying they're communal? Is it groups, uh multiple pairs, or just pair per enclosure?
Yeah, it depends really. The general rule, and I usually follow this for majority of reptiles or lizards in general, is I'll have one male, because obviously
Yes.
males can get
Yes.
territorial, defensive, want to fight. One male and then multiple females. So at the moment, I've typically got pairs or trios together, and yeah, I just have them in my outdoor pits or my other enclosed areas out there, and yeah, they do well together. It's really enjoyable.
And do you keep them outside year round?
Yeah.
You
So
never
where I
bring them in.
live, yeah, where I live, again, being a little bit north of where they naturally occur, it doesn't even get as cold as where they're from. So they thrive out here, especially during the coldest part of winter, which is only a few degrees Celsius. I'm not sure. Do you guys use Celsius?
We use Celsius, yeah. The
Perfect.
Americans
Yeah.
use Fahrenheit, but
Yes,
we use
yes.
Celsius as well, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah,
So
it
you're
gets down
like
about
yeah, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
yeah, it gets down to about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius here at the lowest point. And yeah, the blotched blue tongues don't care at all. They're just at home in that sort of weather. And then the eastern blue tongues are here naturally as well, so they tolerate it well as well.
Okay, and do blue tongue skinks brumate?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, as soon as autumn kicks in, which is late March, and then in the following months there, it'll really start to cool off. They'll usually retreat into some sort of hide or burrow, and then you basically never see them until October rolls around, really. And then they're coming back out, and then they'll start breeding and going through all that process again.
That's very cool. Is it harder to? Well, so first of all, are you adding the burrows and the hides in, or do they scavenge and like make their own burrows while they're out there?
They will make their own, which is what I used to do quite a long time ago. But I find it better now if I make a designated sort of spot for them. So what I do in my outdoor enclosures is I make a literal box and I fill it with
Cool.
hay or straw or anything that'll insulate it quite a bit that they can bury inside. And they'll usually seek that out because it's going to be a dry area that's away from rain and any other moisture or anything like that. It's going to be maybe a little bit warmer. And they'll usually seek that out. They'll bury into there and stay in there the whole winter. And it works really, really well. The biggest problems you'll get with reptiles here in Australia during that brumation period is actually from water and getting rained on and things like that. Mm. They need to have a dry but cool place. If you have any sort of humidity in there, that's when a lot of problems start. You get scale rot, you'll get respiratory infections, which is the big one, and it can be very hard to detect as well because they're cold. They're not really moving around anyway, but they can be slowly withering away without you knowing.
How do you fight that? How do you fight the burrows not getting rained on? Or
so literally the brumation boxes I've made are weatherproof, so they don't allow any water to get inside them. It's a literal box with a huge lid on it. So,
but then how do they get inside?
There's just a little entry hole that they can sort of go into, and okay. The rest of it's all completely covered. Yeah.
So is it hard to spot them when they're in those outdoor enclosures?
It depends if I'm keeping on top of the weeds or not. Because obviously being outside, it's natural ground for the most part. It just everything grows. That, yeah. And they love it though. They love that whole dense sort of jungle in there. But I usually try to keep them well pruned and only grow the plants I want growing in there. So I have it set up in a way where they can be on display and I can see them for the most part. They obviously have little areas they can hide and retreat, which are very important. But generally, they are quite easy to see if the weather's nice, of course. If the weather's not nice, they're usually going to be hiding and not want to bother coming out.
Yeah. Is there any plants that you can grow that they eat?
Yeah, for sure. So the blue tongue specifically, they'll eat a lot of the native weeds and things that grow around. So we have dandelions and things like that. And I just throw those in there, let them grow, and they'll pick them off as they see fit. And I do a bit of that in there, mostly those natural little weeds because they look natural as well to the environment. I don't like having a veggie patch growing inside my enclosure. Yeah. I think it looks a bit how you're going. But yeah, the natural sort of stuff works really well.
That's very, very interesting. And then, I just thought of this question, but it actually was already written. Do you have any native plants that lose in kid flame? Okay. Wow, I actually thought this through more than I thought I did. Cool. Okay. So it's just the blue tongue skinks you're keeping outside then.
And
the turtles. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about the egernia depressa?
Yep.
How do you keep those?
They're literally in this enclosure right here. I don't know if you can see them all too well, but I'll move this up for you.
Yeah.
Well, that way. So they're pretty simple to keep, really. Nice warm spot for them. And again, looking at their natural environment, they like living in, cracks of bark, in hollow logs and trees and things like that. And so that's what I've replicated again. I'm very lucky I've been able to source some natural gum hollow logs. So just put those in there, lizards in, and a bit of heat. It's pretty well that simple. Obviously good lighting. And I've also added in some extra bits of bark and things because they really like to wedge themselves inside a surface. That's why they're all spiky all over, of course.
Yeah.
And makes them feel very safe, and it actually makes them come out more. Funny thing is, I think zoos suffer with this as well a bit. They want animals to be on display for the public, so they take out all the hides so the public can see them.
Right.
Then they're scared out of their mind. They get issues, and it becomes a massive problem. But I find a lot with reptiles, if you give them a abundance of hides and places to feel secure, that they'll be more likely to actually be out on display, because they can very easily just tuck away if they feel scared and then come back out. So done it with these guys, and yeah, it's working great. I've got a little baby in there, first time I've ever bred them, so I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome. Congrats. Is it, and they're one of the smaller species of egernia, correct?
Yeah. There's quite a few species of egernia here in Australia, but the spiny tail group are probably my favorites. And yeah, there's these guys and the 2 or 3 other species, different color forms, and yeah, they're just such cool little tanks. I love them.
Yeah, and they're live bearers as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then I assume communal, since you said the baby's still in there.
Yeah, it's strange though, because they have their little family groups and their little family units, but if they kick someone out or they reject someone, you try and add a different animal in, they will absolutely beat the crap out of them. They are absolutely savage. They'll kill another animal. One of the ones I've actually got, before I had them, it was housed with a bunch of other ones, and they actually tore both of her front hands off because they rejected her from the group.
Wow.
And yeah, so when I got her, she was in pretty horrible looking shape, but it just goes to show how nasty they can be if they don't like someone. But when you have a group that works together well, then they get along perfectly. They cuddle with each other all day, and yeah, they'll breed and have their own little family in there. It's quite sweet.
Yeah, and that's really interesting that they're, I don't know if the smart is the right word, but they have the train of thought to be able to say, like, this is my tribe, you're not a part of it anymore, you're out, or coming into like pack mentality, I guess, almost.
Yeah, I don't know how they know, but yeah, it's very strange.
That's very interesting. Are they insectivores or uh like, yeah, sorry, are they insectivores?
Primarily, yeah. I have heard of people giving them salads and greens and things. They will eat a little bit of that, but primarily they're going to be looking for the insects. That's what they really love, and they are very fun to feed. They will just scoff down any sort of bugs they can find.
Yeah. I don't have any experience with them either, but there is a species, I can't remember which species of egernia that I've seen at a store that I work at, but they would be hiding all day, pretty much never come out, and then crickets would go in, and for like
Oh
this,
yeah,
they'd be
it's
right out.
crazy.
But I think they were at different. What color are the ones that you have? I mean,
So
you know
the
what?
presser are the grey coloured ones. Yeah, no. So the thing is with the whole group is they used to all be called Egernia depressor,
Okay.
and then as time's gone on, they've split them off into their own separate species. So there's 2 different sorts of red ones. I've worked with all the species except Eos. So the more orange looking ones are Epsisolus, and they're really cool.
Okay.
Obviously, like, what a cool looking animal. And then there's also the Signitos, I believe it's called, and they're more of a brick red color. But they're all essentially the same type of yeah. There you go. They're all essentially the same sort of animal, except the red ones live in rocks, whereas the grey ones live in trees.
Oh yeah. Okay. So there are more, a little more arboreal then.
Yeah, for sure.
Is this more similar to?
That's what I've got. Yeah,
That's
the
what you
depressor.
got. Okay. Very, very cool. Oh,
Mm.
pygmy spiny tail skinks. Okay, no, this is not at all what the ones I've seen. I mean, they did look, they had the same
Yeah,
body shape and the same spiny tail, but they were a larger, more brown species.
it sounds like Hosmer's skink to me. They're kind of like them, but with a longer tail.
Oh, sorry, what's the name?
Hosmer's skink. Hosmers. Hosmers.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. This.
Yeah, they're
I
really
think.
cool as well.
Maybe not.
Oh no, that Gidgee skink. Yeah, that's what you're
Gidgey.
thinking of.
That's the one.
Gidgee skink.
That's the
Yeah.
one. There we go. That's the one. Okay.
Yeah, so the depressor, the Hosmers, and the Gidgees are all your main sort of spiny tail skinks. And there's Cunninghams
Okay.
as well, but they're a bit less spiky.
But
The
the
Hosmers are
Gidgeys.
kind of like a giant depressor.
Okay, cool. And then the Gidgeys here, yeah, it is here. The Gidgeys are also egernia then.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very cool. What a cool species. Do you like like have you, you said you've worked with all of them. Are you still only working with this species because it's the your favorite one, or is it just by chance? I don't know. Yeah.
No, I love all of them. They're just the ones that I actually had the chance to actually get some myself. The others I've worked with through at the zoo. So
Okay.
yeah,
Right. Yes.
they're still there and they're awesome. But they're quite rare to come across in as a private keeper and very expensive too. So I had the opportunity to get these guys, and they're actually some of the less pricey ones, but still just as cool as all the rest.
That's yeah, 100%. Just the spikes on them, and even actually, I've never really seen the ones you have up close before, like the picture I just saw.
Mm.
It's almost like there's a white speckling and gray, and like there's some patterning in there. It's interesting.
Yeah, they can vary quite a lot. Some can have some orange spots and things, and others can have silver color to their head, like an actual metallic sort of look. It's really, really cool. There's a lot of variation in them that you wouldn't expect for a gray lizard.
Awesome. Okay. Um, so we're coming up to about the 45-minute mark here, which I usually like to keep it around 45 minutes an hour. So I'm going to jump
Mhm.
off the egernia really quickly because I
Yep.
do want to get a chance to at least chat about the voice forest dragon for a little bit before before we get off here. What's it like keeping them? Are they like that question is like so vague, but they're such an interesting species to me. What's it like keeping them?
Yes. So here in Australia, obviously, we have a lot of cool reptiles, but we don't have anything that's like an iguana or anything like that.
Yeah.
Nothing that's sort of rainforest primeval looking sort of animal, and except for the boids. So they're kind of like a holy grail species here for a lot of people. They're quite common now, but for the longest time, like everyone just went nuts for boids. So I always wanted to keep them, and I eventually got the right license. They're on that next license up, the
Okay.
advanced license.
Yeah.
So I got that, and then I was able to actually purchase some from a friend up in Queensland. So they're incredible species. They're very different to a lot of reptiles. They don't thermoregulate. That's
That
one
was
big thing with them. They're what's called a thermoconformer. So they just take on the environment around them and accept it pretty much. The only exception is if a female's heavily gravid, she'll sometimes go and bask just to cook those eggs a little bit more. That's the only sort of difference. But in the environment they come from, it's very, very stable, tropical North Queensland rainforest. So they live under the canopy where it's quite cool. Usually stays between 20 to 30 degrees Celsius in that sort of range, and very humid. And it's very consistent up there typically as well. So they're sort of just hang out and sit on a branch and look pretty all day. If an insect runs by, then they'll dive down and grab it, sit it back up on the branch, and keep looking pretty. So that is a very cool animal indeed. And I've been fortunate enough to breed them for the last 5 or 6 years now, I think. So yeah, they're very cool. And their eggs need to be incubated quite low as well, only about 19, 20 degrees Celsius in order to hatch them.
And how long does it take?
It varies. That's the interesting thing too. So they breed sort of middle to late winter, and then they'll have their first clutch soon after that. And then that clutch, I've experienced it taking about 175 days or so. But they can have multiple clutches in a season. They'll have 5 or 6, my female anyway. And so that first clutch will be at about 175 days to hatch. But the last clutch she'll lay, which is closer to end of spring, summer, they'll only take 90 to 100 days to hatch.
Wow. Okay.
Just due to that temperature shift through the season, I think. So
yeah.
it's very interesting. So these days, I don't even think about waiting for the days or whatever. I just put them in the incubator, and then I just check it every week or so until they hatch. I don't really think about it anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, after 6 years. Well, before I continue with that, first of all, I want to say I just asked you a super vague question, and you gave me the most perfect answer for the vaguest question. I don't know how you pulled it off, but that was the answer to the question I was asking. You said how many clutches, sorry, per year?
I've had up to 6 clutches before, and they'll usually have 4 to 6 eggs per clutch.
And what's
So
the intervals between them?
Not too sure. Usually, 3 weeks or so, I'd say.
Wow. Okay.
Between each one. So yeah, those females are machines. They just keep pumping them out. It's pretty crazy what they can actually do in a season.
How many females do you have?
I've got 2, but only one that I consistently breed. I've got another one that I just raised up and kept myself as more of a pet.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but one's more than enough if you're trying to breed forest dragons. They just absolutely pump them out. I have to not incubate most of the eggs I get because it's just too many.
Oh wow. Okay, is there not a very high demand for them where you are?
Well, it does become a bit difficult again with the licensing system
Mm-hmm.
because it is harder to get to that second level. So it makes the pool of people that you can sell to a lot smaller. So you don't want to oversaturate the market and you know, not sell anything.
Not
So
nice. And then end
yeah,
up with having to keep all of them. Do you
yeah.
keep your pair together year round? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead. What were you just gonna say?
Oh no, I was just going to say I usually find homes for the animals before I even hatch them out. That
Wait.
way I know exactly what I need to do. But yeah, I do keep the pair year round together. Typically, they usually don't have any issues. The only
Okay.
main issue they would have is the male just relentlessly wants to breed.
Yeah.
He's like a rabbit; he doesn't stop.
Of course. Of course. And is there a brumation for them as well, or is it because they're so far north that it's kind of tropical all the time where they're from?
Yeah, being a species that's closer to the equator like that, they don't really brumate per se. They just slow down a little bit during the cooler months, and they can
Okay.
take cold temperatures as well. Like I don't heat them during winter or anything here. It drops right down to, the teens or so.
Wow. Okay.
And they'll usually just sit on their branch and not really move for a few weeks. Maybe have a bit of a drink, and I just don't feed them much during that time, just to be safe. And yeah, it's always worked perfect for me. And it's great because it's an animal that does slow down in winter, but they're still perfectly on display. You can look at them all the
You can
time.
look at
They're
them all the
sitting right
time.
there.
Yeah.
So that's why
That's
they're one of my favorite things to keep.
that's one of the beautiful things about them, the display thing. Do you have or how beautiful they are when they're on display? It's almost like you have a dinosaur or a dragon
Yeah,
sitting there.
literally, yeah. And they
Yeah.
are they are a very prehistoric species, and I believe the rainforest they're from is the oldest rainforest on Earth. So
Oh
they are
wow. Okay.
truly a prehistoric animal. That it's just really cool to be able to have that in your lounge room.
That's very cool. Have you ever been up there to their native range and sort of seen their wild habitat? I
I'm
feel like
hopefully I'm hopefully going in the middle of this year. I'm finally going to
okay.
make it up there. I used to live in North Queensland, like I said, where I was born, but
Okay.
that would have been a few hours from where they naturally occur, and I was only young at the time, so I didn't
Right.
obviously think about looking for them, and I regret it every day. But yeah, hopefully this year I'm going to go up there and finally see them. But on the coast here, we have their closest cousin, which is the angle-headed dragon, which is kind of like a smaller, less exaggerated version of them, and
Right.
I can find them here.
Gonocephalus.
No, they're in the same genus. I think they used to be Gonocephalus.
Oh,
But yeah, southern angle-headed dragon, they're called. They're really
okay.
cool as well. But you get them in the subtropical rainforests that are only about half an hour away from me here. So I've got my practice finding them, and
Finding them.
now it's time to find the big ones.
That's that's so cool and super exciting. I really like. Good luck. I really hope you find them. I wonder if they're as are they like fairly docile with handling as well?
Captive ones, yeah, they can be. They're not like a bearded dragon, though. They'll typically want
Yeah.
to move off and do their own thing, but mine don't bite me or anything like that. I can hold them. They're fine. I'm sure wild ones would be pretty grumpy, but I guess I'll just have to go and find out.
It's very interesting. They sound a lot like I keep mountain horn dragons,
Oh, yep,
so
yep.
from the Acansaurus species, and they sound a lot like them. Which they also look very prehistoric, but it's like the Boyds take it to another level
Yeah.
of prehistoric. It's yeah, they're so cool. Um, but yeah, maybe one day we'll have to do a whole Boyd's Forest dragon episode because I have so
Yeah,
many
for
more
sure.
questions to ask you.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
sweet. Anyway, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's once again, it's a pleasure to meet you, even if it's online. Um, yeah, hopefully we get a chance to do this again. Can you let everybody know where they can find you?
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to see what I'm up to here in Australia, check out the YouTube channel. It's just Coop's Reptiles. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I'm not very good at coming up with creative names. Same thing on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page, which I sort of regularly update with things that are going on. Again, just Coop's Reptiles. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Coop VDW. And yeah, that's the best place to find me. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on. It's great to meet you. Great to talk to you. And yeah, hopefully it was fun for you.
For sure, yeah, it was so much fun, and we spoke about like the coolest species, and like I said, Australia, of course, is a dream, and keeping outdoors or being able to keep outdoors is something that's super intriguing to me that I also hope to one day move away from this cold and be able to do. So yeah, man, that it was an incredible incredible conversation. Thank you very much.
No worries. I only just scratched the surface. There's plenty more to go over in the future. Don't you worry.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. Part 2 coming soon then.
Awesome. No worries.
Awesome. See you in a second then. Perfect. Thank you very much to everyone else for listening. Go give Cooper a follow. All of his links will be in the description as always. I'm Daffy's Reptiles on all social media platforms and Daffy's Roundtable for the podcast. Thank you for listening once again, and see you on the next one.